Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Off the Shelf, the half-termly library vlog. I'm Mr. Humphreys.
And I'm Miss Oliver. And I'm going to be talking to you about some books for years 7 to 9. So I'm going to kick off with a non-fiction by J.T. Williams called Bright Stars, Black British History. And this book sets out to tell the inspiring stories of 14 black British lives. And it ranges from way back to Tudor times until current modern Britain. And the ongoing influence that these people have. So it's a really important collection, actually, of achievements and contributions right through arts, medicine, politics, and beyond that, really. Whilst there are names in it that you'd expect to see, like Mary Seacole, the nurse, there's also information about the Notting Hill Carnival founder, Claudia Jones. And one name that really caught my attention, I'll show you the page, because it's a name. This person was named after the famous Romantic poet. So he's Samuel Coleridge Taylor, but he was named after the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So that's what caught my attention. But also, he is a composer and conductor, and he was spotted one day performing by none other than Edward Elgar. That's the
the composer.
Edward Elgar. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. And as you can see, the illustrations are really beautiful in it. They're hand painted, and they really do help to bring the lives of each of these different characters to the fore.
It was like a nice watercolour painting.
Yeah, they're really quite stunning. So, but all in all, a very interesting read. Would recommend.
Great. I think J.T. Williams, the author, I believe we've talked about one of her fiction books. She's also a fiction writer. She's the Lizzie and Bell Mysteries, which is set in Georgian England and features two sort of black murder-solving sleuths, teenage girls. So continuing in that vein, I would say, because that was set in Georgian times, featuring black heroines. So very good.
Yeah. So my next book is a fiction book, and this is Foxlight by the Carnegie Medal-winning author Katia Balin. And when I saw this, I enjoyed her previous novel, The Light in Everything, so much. I was really interested to see what this was all about. Just like The Light in Everything, there are two protagonists in it, and they're two twin sisters, and they're opposites. So you've got Fen, who is fierce, free, and loud, and you've got her twin sister Ray, who's very shy and quiet. But Fen has a connection with foxes, and Ray has a connection with nature in general. So they do have some similarities too, and they're very close as sisters. So the story begins, it all originates from the fact that they're found curled up in the marshes with foxes, and they're taken to a children's home, and so it's a found home that they live in, and they're sort of happy there. But then one day, the appearance of a fox, so lots of mentions of fox, they take as a kind of the clue to leave the home and go out on an adventure to find their real family. Because up to this point, they've not known anything about their identity, where they're from. So they've got lots of questions. So they go off on an adventure. And this book is really about the adventure that they have. And as you'd expect from Katia Balin, if you've read any of her previous novels, it's beautifully written. The characters are really vivid, strong setting as well. And the theme of being wild is very much to the forefront in it. And she does it really well. So it promises to be both heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time.
Make you laugh and make you smile and make you cry.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
And my final fiction book is Natasha Hastings' The Miraculous Sweetmakers, The Frost Fair. And one of the reasons I picked this was I particularly like this type of magical fantasy cover. It always draws me in somehow. And so I thought it looked interesting. And it's described on the back, actually, as a spellbinding tale of deep friendship, glittering magic, and enchanting mystery. So perfect recipe there, especially for fans of Abby Elphinstone, Tamsin Marchant and Anna James. So if you love those books, you're bound to love this. So this is a historical novel, and it's set in 1683 with the Great Frost in London. And it's about two 13-year-olds, Thomasina, and her best friend Anne. and they sell sweets on the Thames, the frozen Thames. And there's a rumour that there's a frost fair, a magical frost fair, and that if you can find it, then you can make any wish. And Thomasina wants to make a wish to have her twin brother Arthur returned. So,
big wish, that.
yeah. So they do find it, but they find that the frost fair isn't exactly all that they thought it would be, and that all wishes don't necessarily come for free. So
okay.
A lot happens obviously along the way, and it just seemed to me the perfect time of year to be curled up with a hot chocolate in the warmth, reading the magical frost fair. And yeah, I just thought that would be really nice to do. And also, if you do like this book, there's a sequel out next summer called The Sea Queen. So
okay. So another sort of like fantasy franchise almost.
Yes.
Things like Anna James.
One to get your teeth
into. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much, Miss Oliver. Right, so what have we got for older readers that have come in lately that have caught our eye? So first up, I've got this one here. This is called Africa is Not a Country, and I hope I'm saying this name correctly, Dipo Faloyin. Okay. Now, we've heard that expression before about how Africa sometimes is lumped into one sort of collective whole, you know, a continent as a country. It's not the only one. America is another one. When people say America, I think a lot of us assume they mean the USA, and it's like, well, actually, there's South America, there's Canada, so it's a lot more to it than that. But so it's not the only place that is referred to in such terms, but of course, there are negative connotations if you when we say Africa, because I think we tend to think of it as a place of poverty, civil war, colonialism, strife, deserts, famine, all that sort of thing. So now, obviously, that's not true. There's a lot more to it than that. And this book sort of skillfully, very, very skillfully deconstructs all of that and shows that there's a lot more. There's so many different countries. We have got close links with a school in Tanzania, as I'm sure many of you know, the KYGN school. And, that in itself is a unique country with its own things on offer that it doesn't have in common with the many, many other countries of Africa. I think it's something like 50 plus countries in Africa.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. It's a huge continent, a huge place. But yeah, even there, when I've come back from there, people have said to me, well, how was Africa? I was like, well, I went to Tanzania, not Africa, so I couldn't tell you about the rest of Africa,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about sort of exploding those myths, and it's actually it might sound like very worthy at first when you hear that description, but actually it's quite funny and humorous. Just to give you an idea, so here's a little epigraph that it's got at the beginning in brackets: insert generic African proverb here, ideally an allegory about a wise monkey and his interaction with a tree, or a relationship between a donkey and the ant that surprisingly speaks to grand gestures of valor. Sign it off, ancient African proverb. So it's very, very tongue-in-cheek, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a very important read for that reason, because obviously we are still perhaps a little stuck in the past when it comes to the thing of Africa. So exploding the myths as far as that goes. Next up, another non-fiction choice called Philanthropy Revolution. Okay, and it's by Lisa Greer and Larissa Kostov. Now, Surbiton High has a stellar record of supporting charities. We each year we raise tens of thousands of pounds of charity. I've mentioned Tanzania and KYGN. That's just one charity we support. We support various other charities too, both at home and overseas, big and small. And yeah, it closely aligns with our values. Our values of being compassionate, our values of being a community and helping others who are less fortunate than us. Now, charities in a post-pandemic world have struggled a bit, of course, because the pandemic really did sort of like cause a lot of a reset of certain things, and a lot of charities really struggle to stay afloat, and they've had to adapt and adjust to this new type of world, new way of doing things. But how do they do that? Well, this is what this book is all about. It discusses how older traditional methods of fundraising are essentially outdated, and it also gives practical tips on how you can actually do some fundraising to make a difference. Now, so many of you are involved in a lot of fundraising endeavours, so this is very good for that reason, be it through supporting some of the charities I've just mentioned that school does, but also other charity work you might do, or perhaps a lot of you are perhaps interested in working in a not-for-profit sector in the future on the basis of all the things that you've done here. So this is sort of like your Bible, your manual going forward as far as that goes. And then lastly, I have a fiction choice, Julia by Sandra Newman. Now, this is a companion piece to George Orwell's seminal classic 1984. And what it does, it gender flips the two main characters from that. So those of you who read 1984 will know the main character is Winston Smith, and he gets together with a colleague of his who works in another department called Julia. And so this time, Julia is told from Julia's point of view. Julia is the main character. Now, one of the there's a quote on the Dust Jacket that sums it up very, very well. This extraordinary novel is like a newly discovered room in your house, in a dream. The illusion is so precise, the execution so masterful, that you think it must have been there all along, just waiting for you to find it. That really sums it up, because it's a very apt description, because it's not just a sort of slavish retelling. It's not like a shot for shot remake, only with Julia's point of view. It adds to the world. It adds new bits. Just to give you an example of that, how it ends in the original 1984, that does happen in this as well, but about 100 odd pages from the end. So it's like, okay, so what's going to happen?
There's more.
There's more. Yeah, there's more. So, it adds sort of like layers and fresh perspective, new modes of thinking, new ideas, while staying within Orwell's world, the narrative from it. It doesn't radicate apart, because obviously it's still the same characters, still the same setting, but whole new avenues are opened. So it works
Great
for
premise
that.
for a book.
Absolutely. And of course it is a great book, 1984.
Yeah.
This, hopefully, in the same way that something like Wide Sargasso Sea has stood up as a companion piece to Jane Eyre, hopefully this, in the years to come, will stand up as a great companion piece to 1984. So, yes, any fans of 1984, this is which is most of us, let's be honest.
Yeah.
This is a must for you. Okay, so there you go. So that's some of our exciting new arrivals in the library. So up next, we have our special guest for the episode. I'm very excited to say that our special guest for this episode is Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy is a very keen, prolific reader. Some of you may remember last World Book Day, he did one of our story corners and read to quite a few of you. So, without further ado, let's find out what he has been reading and what his reading interests are.
At the moment, it's the book I'm reading right now, or the series I'm reading right now. So it's called Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. So I'm really into sci-fi, which might come across in the remainder of these questions. But Iron Gold is a second trilogy, following a trilogy called the Red Rising trilogy, which was back in 2014-15, something like that. And so I picked up the second trilogy only this year. I didn't actually know they'd written another one. And it's essentially the same characters, but now instead of being sort of rebellious and changing the world, they're now in charge and they've got children. So I think in some respects that sort of is maybe more relevant to me now. But I'm enjoying it because it was incredibly hard to read the first of the three books, because it almost assumed you'd read the previous three recently, whereas it had actually been about 6 years. So it took me a while to get my head around who was who and who they had been previously versus who they are now. But now I'm really enjoying it. It's that good sort of space opera world building, lots of different characters. These books are written with different chapters from different narrative perspectives as well. So I'm really enjoying it. So it's slightly different to the originals, but a challenging read, but been worth putting the effort in. Basically, for the first dozen chapters was pretty hard going, but I've enjoyed it since. Yes, probably David Baldacci. It's a bit of a carryover from a different world. When a book going through an airport, essentially. If I was ever going through an airport and had finished a book accidentally on the way to the airport when a plane was delayed or something like that, David Baldacci books were always the books that I knew that if I picked one up, I'd enjoy reading it. It would be an interesting story. So they're all sort of murder mystery. He does different sets of books with different characters. So you can generally pick up the first, second and third book that have the same central character, and there's a lot of sort of police or spy or very American, but there's always a conspiracy or something that's going wrong, and our heroes are trying to resolve the issue. So the most recently I've read there's an Amos Decker series, which is fantastic. So it's about a policeman, but essentially, to cut a very long story short, he suffered a fairly traumatic brain injury, which means he's unable to forget anything. And then he has a sort of synesthesia thing where he sees different crimes in different colours. They've been really interesting books to read because his brain is changing over time. So he is losing some of his skills and changing in other ways, sort of regaining his humanity, but worried that he's losing his unique skill set to solve crimes that other people can't solve. So all of those books, and they're all fairly similar. They follow a pretty basic pattern of mystery crime. Our hero then struggles and eventually solves the crime, hopefully with the help of some other people. But every time I ever went through an airport years ago, because he must have written 100 books at least. you could always pick one up and you knew what you were getting. And so I still do. I still pick them up now, but digitally now rather than in an airport at W.H. Smith's or whatever. So this when I saw this question, just spoiler, I saw the question in advance. It was one of the ones that I instantly knew the answer to, and it was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Without doubt, that was my favourite book as a child. As I got slightly older, I was really into The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Those were books but it was, for me, the book I remember most reading as a child was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's the book I spoke about when I interviewed for my senior school, because that was the question, right? What book have you read recently? And I just loved that book, and I still love it. And I read all of them. But when my son was born, before he obviously even had any chance to read, I bought the massive hardback of all of the Narnia Chronicles, which was totally impractical because it's A4 sized, it's hardbacked and weighs a ton, so it's an entirely impractical book. But that's how much I loved that book when I was young. I wanted to make sure that he had the opportunity to read that book and the follow-up books that came with it as he got older. Just everything about it, the fantasy of it, the different worlds, and it's actually then, the older you get, the more you read it. There's a lot going on underneath that book, which is interesting as well. Yes, I don't read a lot of non-fiction, if I'm being completely honest. I read for escapism, for distraction. So people often recommend really worthy, leadership books and things like that. Or for me, science books, biology books, right? I've got a stack of David Attenborough type books that I just don't read because I tend to be reading because I want escapism, a bit of a distraction. However, on that note, when I was doing my master's, which was quite a long time ago now, but I read a book called True North by Bill George. He's a professor out of Harvard. And it's based on this idea of authentic leadership. And so I was doing my master's in leading innovation and change. And it was actually recommended to me by my then girlfriend, now wife. And she was like, I've read this book, I think you'd really like it. And it genuinely changed how I approached my career in education. Because for some reason I'd always kind of thought that you'd have to fit a mould or a pattern or be a certain kind of person to lead in any way within a school. And what that book did really eloquently was make me realise that the most important thing I can do is be me and then follow my passions. So I recommend that book to everybody. If you want to know how you can progress and move forward, True North by Bill George would be my absolute must read. And he's quite old now, but he's still really active on LinkedIn. If anyone's into that, you can find him on LinkedIn, and he's always publishing new thoughts and bits about the book. But for me, it was that. You can be yourself and still be successful and progress and make a difference. You don't have to be a cookie cutter of some idea of leadership, which I think is probably what it was like when I was growing up, is that sort of alpha personality leadership. So that book totally changed the way I thought about it, and it's probably then impacted my entire career ever since. So, this is a great question. I'm going to cheat, though. On the very first one, I'm going to cheat, because probably my favourite science fiction book of all time is a book called Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie. And like all good science fiction, it's a trilogy. There's Ancillary Justice, Ancillary Sword, and Ancillary Mercy. And if I had to take one, I'd still take the first one. But I'd love to take, if I could get a compendium of all three, I'm going to cheat slightly and take the three of them together. They are the only books I've read as an adult that I have read again. I've never done that before. And I enjoyed them immensely reading them again. So I'm going to cheat on the first one. The second one is going to be a book called From a Certain Point of View, which is a collection of short stories based on Star Wars. So based on the Star Wars movie, or Episode 4 as it would be known now by other people. And it's a collection of short stories, and as the title might suggest, it is the entire Star Wars movie, but written from the perspective of the characters in the background. So just odd side characters that you didn't even maybe have names, or characters that had one line or were stood in a corridor somewhere observing the main cast. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And that book is endlessly entertaining. So if I was on a desert island, it would be the replacement for actually having the movie, which I can do the whole film in my head, but it's all those different angles. It's a really interesting read if anyone is into Star Wars. And then finally, the Barack Obama biography is my third book. because it is on the side of my bed, and I've had it there for 2 years now, and I still haven't finished it. So if I'm stuck on a desert island, I loved reading the first half of it, and then I got distracted by a whole raft of sci-fi books like the Expanse series, which has got 9 or 10 books in it. And I haven't picked it up since. So I'm taking the Barack Obama biography with me so I can actually finish it, and do something a little more thought-provoking maybe when I'm on my desert island.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And next it's the turn of our pupil librarians, Sophie and Pragya, who've been working very hard in their lunchtimes every Tuesday to produce this.
Hello, we are pupil librarians Sophie and Pragya, and for our short video we have decided to talk about a not-so-famous author who is well known because of a couple of their books or a series, but as an author they aren't so well recognised. The author we chose was Holly Black. Holly Black is an American writer and editor best known for her children's and young adult fiction. Holly Black's writing style is immersive and atmospheric. Her descriptions are vivid, and she skillfully balances action with introspection, creating a dynamic reading experience, and has written books in a variety of genres for a wide range of age groups, but is most inspired and well known for fantasy and young adult fiction. Her most recent work and her most renowned work is the New York Times best-selling young adult Book of the Year series, which is about the main character Jude Dart finding her place in the kingdom of Elfhame as a mortal as she becomes entangled in the perilous political conspiracies of the immortal fairy realm. As a coming-of-age story, The Cruel Prince explores themes of truth, power, and identity. Finally, Holly Black has a variety of awards. She's the #1 New York Times best-selling author of fantasy novels, including the novels of Elfhame, The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, The Spiderwick Chronicles, and her adult debut, Book of Night. She has been a finalist for an Eisner Award and the Lodestar Award, and the recipient of a Mythopoeic Award, a Nebula, and a Newbery Honor. Her books have also been translated into 32 languages worldwide and adapted for film, and she is currently working on a duology following the Folklore series.
Thank you very much for that, Sophie and Pragya. It's good to hear a bit more about Holly Black, who's one of our more popular authors here in the library.
Okay, and we'll end today with our trivia fact, which is the word bookworm. I used to be called a bookworm as a child, and I think lots of people are. Mm-hmm. And the word actually originates from the insects that eat the binding of books. So that's where it came from.
Ooh.
And they live in it too. They live and eat the binding of the books.
Right, so all of us, I'm a bookworm. I'm happy to admit it. So basically, we're all basically devouring books.
Exactly.
We are literally...
Yeah, and I love that concept.
Yeah, we are. We probably are consuming them at a rapid pace. So there we go. All right, well, thank you very much. Okay, so that concludes this episode of Off the Shelf. So have a great Christmas. Keep reading. Lots of Christmas reads, if you so desire. Yes. And we shall see you in the new year. Until then, take care. Bye.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas. Bye. Bye.